Hi, I am Brent Feldman, and we are back with another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am joined today by Mitch Weisburgh. He's the author of Mindshifting books, and he's a speaker and thought leader as well. Hi, Mitch. How are you doing?
Hi, Brent. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to, jumping into the questions. I guess in general, you were the founder of a technical training firm for almost 20 years. You've created games for educational purposes and had other positions in and around learning and development. How did all of these kind of previous roles lead you to your current passion and what you're doing now?
So my current passion is around mind shifting. And I'll start off with the work that I was doing around education, which is working with education publishers and digitizing their content. And the reason I went into education is I thought education should be a way to take kids from wherever they are and lead them so that they could have successful lives. And it should be a leveler so that kids from low socioeconomic status can go through an education system and get raised, but it should also be raising kids from a high social economic status. And so I felt, technology is a great way of doing that because, people can have access to technology and it can make things more effective and more efficient. And so I was doing that for about 15 years. And after 15 years, I'm starting to have these doubts like, kids aren't any better prepared when they become adults now as they were 15 years ago. Like, what's going on? I'm not really having an impact, in terms of the kids, companies, I can advise them. So that's going through my mind at the same time as I get an email from a university in Niger, of all places, not Nigeria, but Niger, saying, we're interested in having an education technology executive, entrepreneur, talk to our undergraduates about education technology in the U.S. Would you be interested? And, I'm not anybody special. They probably sent it out to 2,000 people. I was just one of them. But I think I was probably the only person who responded. So my response as I'm going through this thing about, I'm not having the impact I want is, something, I don't think having an EdTech entrepreneur from the U.S. talking to your kids is going to really help them in their lives. But for a long time, I've been interested in how successful people evaluate situations and then act on them in order to achieve results. And if you'd like, I could do a session on sense making and how those people do approach situations. And through various talks, we agreed that I would go out to Niger for 2 days and teach a 2-day workshop. Or actually, I would go out there for a week. I teach 2-day workshops in 6 months. And so, you're an entrepreneur and you deal with entrepreneurs all the time. It's like, what do we do? Okay. We see a problem, we come up with a solution, we say we can do it, we shake hands, and then it's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I was in June, July of 2017. But I had until February when I was going out there. And so I just read 11, 12 different books on different subjects. Okay. So books on, different ways you make decisions. Like economics is a way to making decisions. Psychology, neuroscience, cognitive science, military strategy, sales, books on influence, just all these books from different disciplines. And it's like, something, each one has a slice about how you evaluate situations and what you do and how you continue to motivate yourself, but nobody put it all together. So I feel something, let me just try putting it all together into one cohesive unit. And I came up with, 3 elements. One, resourcefulness, the second is resilience, and the third is collaboration. Put them together into a 2-day workshop, fly out to Niger, teach the kids for 2 days. There's 60, 70 of them between the ages of 18, 25 in the workshop. And at the end of the workshop, it's and that's sense making. And they stood up and cheered.
Oh, wow.
And it was oh my gosh, I did not expect that. And the second one, they did too. And, thinking about it, it's nobody teaches us that just because we're sure something is true doesn't make it true.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody teaches us that when we think we can't do something, that doesn't mean we can't. But as soon as we know that we can't do something, we lose access to our own ability to to be resourceful and to think of ways that we can. If we disagree with somebody, maybe that's not a sign that we're right or we're wrong, or that they're right and that they're wrong. Maybe it's a sign that we're thinking about things a little bit differently, and that if we could talk it over, I could learn something from the other person, they could learn something from me, and maybe we could come up with a solution that's better than either one of us could have come up with. Nobody teaches those things. And so when they got this, it was like, a revelation to them. And so this is 2018. It's now 2025 as we're talking. I'm still in touch with about 6 or 7 of them who are progressing. They're now adults. One of them, 3 or 4 of them aren't in Niger anymore. Some are in Cote d'Ivoire. A couple of them are in France. One of them's in Scotland. But that's what inspired me to say, something, working with education publishers, that's okay, but this is really where I should be. And so since 2018, I've gradually moved over. So the last 3 or 4 years, everything has been about mind shifting.
Wow, that's great. I did see on, I guess your website that you mentioned that high performance people can frequently be living in a survival mode.
Right.
And I guess, how do most people end up getting to that point? And is there any way that you can avoid that?
No, you're stuck. The rest of your life, you're just going to be miserable. I'm sorry. Okay, can we end this now?
Yeah. All right, cool. Great.
Okay. Yeah, this is the way it is. So, obviously we're all human. Okay. Mm-hmm. And human beings, we've evolved from other animals over hundreds of millions of years. And the first parts of the brain that were developed in terms of decision making and movement and stuff is an area that in human beings, we call our limbic system, or the survival brain, you might call it. And that part of the brain is 100% geared to keeping the organism safe. That's the number one. And in people, it's also, in all animals, it's also geared to reducing the amount of effort that you need in order to make decisions. And then in people also, we have the strong urge to belong and fit in with groups. So it's like copying what other groups are doing. And so those are basically 3 aspects of the limbic system. And the limbic system, since it's designed for survival, it has to be able to take really small amounts of information, come to a decision, act fast, and focus the whole organism on whatever it is that you're doing. So the limbic system basically wakes up in like 2/100ths of a second. Now, when mammals started developing, mammals developed another part of the brain, the cerebral cortex, and the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of like the front of that, has been most evolved, in the great apes and especially in human beings. And it's that prefrontal cortex that gives us the ability to, say, empathize with other people, to be creative, to do critical thinking. Well, that part of the brain doesn't wake up to a stimulus until like 2 or 3 seconds. So whether you're high performance or low performance or whatever, when some stimulus comes in, you look at a situation, you look at an opportunity, generally what happens is your limbic parts of the brain evaluate that first. And number one, they're looking for survival. So the number one thing they look at is this a threat? And if it's a threat, then you're, fight, flight, freeze, or maybe what is everybody else doing? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then even if it's not a threat, it's like, well, okay, maybe I don't need fight, flight, freeze, but what is everybody else doing? And what do I already know how to do so I don't even have to think about this? Okay. Mm-hmm. And so those are really the 5 different types of things that the prefrontal cortex does. So if you're a successful individual, probably you've trained your limbic mind in a number of things so that it has a lot of different habits or fluencies, and it can access those, and you don't have to think either.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you're, generally, if you're, you look at something and this is what we have to do, and these other people who are disagreeing, I just have to convince them, or I just have to walk over them, or something. This is the right way, and we're going to do this, and it's going to solve the problem. And you've shut off the ability of your prefrontal cortex to, think through, like, well, what are the other solutions that I could? What are the other possibilities? What other information should I have? If these people are objecting, what are they seeing that I don't? Do they have different priorities? And am I missing something? And so, high people who are making a high impact, people who are being very successful, they may have highly developed limbic systems, but if they can at times pull themselves back into this feeling of being curious, or of wonder, or of playfulness, exploration, maybe they can find more subtle, more nuanced solutions than what they would initially come up with. And they'll probably end up being happier and get along better with people because they're no longer steamrolling them.
Yeah. They're actually making a better, more concerted effort to put themselves in the moment, maybe, and not necessarily just react to something. That's helpful. I guess you speak about happiness, and we had somebody else on the podcast who talked about joy, and she was talking about her name is Jen Whitmer, and her philosophy was that people should be experiencing joy in the workplace, and I and was feeling like that was critical for success in the workplace, people to work better together. But in your opinion, should we be prioritizing these kind of emotions over success, just purely at its core of making more money, doing the quote unquote whatever the hallmarks of success you want to put on it? Or is it just a good barometer in general that in the absence of joy, something needs to change? How do you think those kind of emotions? It's almost you talk about the limbic system and these kind of gut reactions, but how do we think about maybe the positive side on the other side? Is that something that we should be focusing on, or is that not necessary?
So I think to a large extent it's more of a barometer rather than a focus. Like, if you're living your life and you're not happy, then you only get one chance in life, and none of us are going to get out of this alive. Okay. So you might as well figure out, at that point, what do I have to do to be happy? But being happy probably doesn't mean, sitting on a beach and just, maybe short term. Okay. But that type of happiness is relatively short term, and it always ends, which I guess that's the definition of short term. And we're also going to go through times where we're unhappy. So you can be happy or unhappy, but still be understanding, like, hey, I've got a happy life. We can work really hard and be happy if we're engaged and motivated. So part of the idea with mind shifting is, if you are about to do something, or you're supposed to do something and you're resisting it, like, I have to do this, or I really don't want to do this, and you're procrastinating or something, is to maybe take a step back and say, the fact that I'm procrastinating is saying something to me. And so you can come back. There's so many different ways of coming back. One is like, well, what do I really want to happen? Another is like, what would make this more fun? Can I gamify this? Like, if I'm about to deal with somebody who generally sets me off, and I know I'm going to be dealing with them, I can make a game out of it and say, something, can I come back 10 times with statements without getting upset? Or are they going to get me to be upset sometime in the first one or two?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I can make a game out of it. But yes, it's, I think it's important to always keep in mind our lives. Are we being happy? But the pursuit of happiness, that we have this thing, like we think, oh, something, if I just get this diploma, I'm going to be happy. If I just get this raise, I'm going to be happy. And actually that leads to kind of addictive behavior, because we never are happy for long. And I think the the hormone that does that to us is basically dopamine. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's these four happy hormones, and generally speaking, when we feel when those get released into our brain, we generally are feeling happy. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and the endorphins. But the one of the issues with dopamine is dopamine says to our brain, "Hey, prepare to be happy because this next thing that you're going to do, it's going to make you happy, and you should do more of it." But feeding that dopamine, that's what gets us addicted to, say, social media. That's that gets us addicted to our phone. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I just got to, if I scroll a little bit longer, I'm going to be happier. If I work a little bit harder, I'm going to be happier. And so it's kind of taking a step back and saying, well, wait a minute, what do I really want? What really makes me happy in the long term? And then you don't focus on the happiness, you focus on the things that you do that probably bring meaning to you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, and I can definitely sense the underlying idea of resilience that you speak about, because it's not necessarily about either avoiding the bad feelings or having the good feelings. It's how do you come back as you struggle, which everybody will. Everybody runs into challenges, but how do you come back from that? And I feel like that is also it's such a critical lesson that I think people really do. They need to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you reach the pinnacle of emotional mastery. What is the feeling you feel? Is it enlightenment? Is it merely a better way of processing your emotions, impulses, and thoughts? What is that point as people develop all of these skills and get to this sort of like next spot where they can deal with them better? Is there a feeling associated with that, or is it the absence of those things?
So I don't think you ever reach a pinnacle.
Hmm.
Okay. I think that, in my ideas of mind shifting, and that kind of differs a little bit with, say, Eastern philosophy, which is you can become enlightened. And I don't know what's right or what's wrong, because it could be that you could become enlightened.
Mm-hmm.
But in mind shifting, the idea isn't necessarily that you reach the state of total bliss and happiness and your problems melt away. I think that the way our brains naturally work is, whatever we do, the parts of the brain that make us miserable, that have us criticize ourselves, and I only need to do this, or you idiot, how could you possibly do that? You're so stupid. That those parts of the brain, they always come back, and they always are there trying to, limiting us, preventing us from risk, putting ourselves at risk or at possible danger. But one of the things that makes us happy is the ability to recognize that. A lot of psychologists call those that are part X, is to say, oh, something, that's just my part X and it's warning me. But something, yes, that's a warning, but I don't have to be miserable about it. I got the warning. I'm going to figure out what I really want to do. And then you just do it. The feeling that you get that generally means that you're in your prefrontal cortex, or what your resourceful mode, or some people will call it your sage mindset, is this feeling of being curious, or you're in wonder, or maybe humility. But there's so many connotations of the word humility, but knowing that you don't have it all figured out, but you're in the process of trying to find out more.
Mm-hmm.
So curiosity, wonder, playfulness. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a number of books, he called it flow.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's what you're trying to get into, is that sense of flow where you're not in full control, but you're enjoying what you're doing.
Cool. Love that. All right. Well, this, is a little bit of a, kind of jump or a tangent, but like the Noom is an app that got wildly popular that helps people, maybe lose weight. I think there's multiple goals that you can kind of apply for, through the app itself, but through behavior pattern changes.
Mhm.
And is this the same kind of principles that you're wanting people to apply, is, as opposed to resting on things that they've probably done, whether that be, bad habits or things they're just, doing consistently, that is this the same kind of thing that you're looking to impart on people?
So it could be, and I don't really have an answer because I am not a Noom user. I have gone on to the website,
Mhm.
and it's very likely that what they're doing uh, is using some of the principles of mind shifting, the being able to tap into your resourceful parts of your brain, in order to get you to think through what your end goals are and to rehearse doing things so that when the situation comes up, you know what to do. So as an example, um, if you're not really thinking about it, but you're on a diet and you walk up and somebody hands you a plate of cookies, without thinking about it, you're going to start eating the cookies.
Mhm.
Okay. And then you're going to beat up yourself. It's like, oh, geez, I did it again. But while you're eating the cookie, you're thinking, something, it's just one or two cookies. I can go back on my diet tomorrow. And so that's your kind of like your saboteurs of your part X, um, sabotaging your higher order values, which is I want to live a healthy life. But I think that what Noom does is Noom has you go back and think like, what are your priorities?
Mhm.
So my priority is I want to live a healthy life. Okay, let me give you this is what I would do if I were new. Let me
Mhm.
give you a situation that you're going to encounter. You're at a buffet and there's a ton of different things and you could eat as much as you want to. There's no cost. Everybody's expecting you to go back, but you really want to eat healthily. If you really wanted to eat healthily, what would you do? And you might think, well, I would walk through the buffet. I would pick out the two or three things that I most want to try. I would envision my plate, how much of the plate I would fill with those, and that would be enough. That would be enough to eat. And then it might reinforce that a few times so that you've now built up a habit in advance by simulating a situation. And then when you are confronted with that situation, you walk into a buffet, you walk into a meal where there's a lot of food on your plate, and you already know what you're going to do because it's built into your habits, it's built into your limbic system. If I were Noom, that's how I would be building the app.
Yeah, that's cool. Because those behavior patterns that we get into, and then like you said, the kind of rationalization afterwards of like, oh yeah, it was fine. I'll just, that's
Yeah.
how you can probably wind yourself into many problems. And the forecasting, or seeing what you could do in the future is definitely, it just, kind of makes sense because as I don't know, you can tell me, but is that, the regressing back into your, kind of like simpler parts of your brain of just, grabbing at the things that your brain are, kind of telling you that, oh, this is what you want. This is what you need. But if you practice it, that helps you get out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's really two ways of improving your limbic reactions.
Mhm.
Okay. One way is to build up better habits. So your habit might have been in food, to just like eat, okay? Or your habit might have been if you're dealing with a person and they trigger you, is to go back and trigger them back, okay? But you could build up a better habit that says, okay, I'm going to be meeting. I meet with this person often. They always trigger me. How am I going to react next time they try to trigger me?
Mm.
Okay, and so you build up in your mind by simulating it a habit. We do that in sales. Okay, so if you're in a sales situation, you don't, maybe you do, but if you're a really really successful salesperson, you've gone over in your mind the questions that this other person is going to be asking, the objections they're going to be raising, and how you're going to be meeting them. So you have those already preloaded into your habits, your fluencies. So when they happen, you're able to spend your cognitive resources looking at their face, seeing what their reaction is, and you're able to pull from all these different habits, fluencies that you built. Oh, they just raised this one. All right, I'm prepared to respond to that. And you never get it 100%, but you're way ahead of the game by imagining it. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, you got tools in the tool belt.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Well, and
Okay,
that
so I'm sorry.
oh,
Because,
go
no,
ahead.
no, no, because that's one, okay, is improving your fluencies. The other way is by learning how to be more self-aware, okay, is
Okay.
to understand, oh my gosh, I'm in limbic mode. I'm fighting, fleeing, freezing, or something. I'm just doing this because I can see it. Like all these other people are doing things, and I have this urge to just follow along with them. Maybe I should take a step back and calm that limbic part of the brain so that I can access what's really important to me. So that you call it metacognition, self-awareness, humility, um, that ability to think about what we're thinking is the second way to become more effective.
Oh, that's cool. That actually that does step right into the, kind of next question. And, and I will say that it when I was, seeing some of the podcasts that you were on and, and researching some of these questions, the Marcus Aurelius's, sort of Stoic philosophies, about, and especially the theory that, kind of words themselves mean nothing, came to mind. And, that it's your reaction to them, not necessarily the words themselves. But, I saw you were on a podcast with the Silicon Valley Rotary E Club, and, and you had mentioned triggering on there too. Is it hard for people to realize that it's their own behavior? You mentioned that, it's good that, people should kind of take a pause, analyze their own behavior, but do you think that is it challenging for people to sometimes realize that maybe they could be the problem?
So it's a skill that you build up. Okay. There's Nassim Taleb, I think his name is, who wrote he wrote a lot of great books. One of them is on antifragility. Okay. And one of the theses of antifragility is to be able to understand when we're just reacting to situations and to think like, oh my gosh, I'm just reacting. It's a skill that you slowly build up. Initially, you don't do it. We don't even think about it. You start thinking about it, and then naturally we beat ourselves up when we've reacted wrong. But we don't have to beat ourselves up. We can show ourselves a little bit of grace. But the more you do it, the better you are at doing it. So I don't think it's that hard, but it does take a year to build up so that it becomes a regular practice.
Cool. Okay. And, I guess I was seeing maybe elements of stoicism, maybe threaded through potentially other, positions that you held. And actually you mentioned one just now, which is like making sure that you aren't beating yourself up over things, that's not necessarily helpful or productive. But also the idea of empathy in general for others, of putting yourself in, sort of like somebody else's shoes. Are these coincidences, or was that part of things, like were some of these Stoic lessons part of things that you actually imbued in, your system, in mind shifting in general, or is it just merely a coincidence and I'm doing something?
No. It's definitely part of mind shifting. It's not only mind shifting. None of these things that I've pulled together to put in mind shifting, almost none of them came from me. They came from people who are a lot smarter than I am. And this idea of, triggering behavior, it's like what's going on in your head, not the situation itself. That actually came from a lecture that I attended, I'm going to say like in the late 80s or something, where this woman came and talked to our company, and she says, it's not the situation, it's your response to the situation that determines things. And the example that she uses is a traffic jam. Like, you could be in a traffic jam and you could say, I've got this meeting, like I'm going to miss the meeting. It's wasting my time. I could be there already. I could be doing this. I could be doing that. And you could be looking at the person right next to you in a different car, and they're just kind of like mellow out. Maybe they're listening to a book. Maybe they're, maybe they're having a conversation. Maybe they're just listening to music or whatever. It's not the traffic jam. It's like your interpretation of the traffic jam.
Yeah.
And like, so that registered with me a little bit, but, I don't think that I fully got it until like a week or so later. And I was in a traffic jam, and I was supposed to, on my way into New York, to meet with a really, really large prospect and the salesperson who had brought the project in. It was my company. And she and I were going to meet with this prospect, and I looked at the traffic, and I wasn't going to make it. Mm-hmm. So I call her, and she's like, Mitch, I could close this. I thought it'd be cool if you were there and everything, but like, I've closed stuff before. Yeah, this is a little bit bigger than some of the stuff I've closed, but I got it this far. Don't worry about it. If you don't make it, I'll deal with it, and we'll close it. And it's like, oh, okay, something, maybe I can just like chill out. It turns out, I did make it just in time for the meeting, but instead of being like really filled with angst about, oh, like, I just made it, like I dealt with all this traffic. It was like I chilled out during the traffic. I made it. It's like, hey, even though I was in a traffic jam, I'm here now. Let's have the meeting. The meeting went great. We closed the deal. And that's when it dawned on me. It's like, something you really can control what your reaction is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important because, I think other people will interpret that reaction as like, how they deal with you. And so that can be super important, which actually leads me into the next question, which is about, do you, have you experienced, and I know you mentioned that, teaching some of these, ideas has gone back a little ways, but have you noticed that people who understand the principles of mind shifting are then looking to help other people understand them as well? Because at the end of the day, I guess one of the last principles of like collaboration is critical. And without some people being able to get out of their own way, may struggle with doing that. But is it something that you see as being, sort of taught and passed on through, the people that sort of get it and read it and understand it?
So that's my mission. There's so many levels to that question. It's such a cool question. Because one of the levels is like, well, geez, something I can just, if I understand mind shifting, why can't I just teach, I'll just teach other people. You can't change another person. Okay. To be able to mind shift is something that you do. What you can do is you can maybe prompt them with some questions. And if they're ready for those questions, you can open up their minds. So if they're already upset, angry, afraid, that's not the moment where you can teach them mind shifting. The best that you can do is to maybe help them distract and calm down their limbic mindset. But if you can, when people are calm, give them the vocabulary and tools to be able to understand how to mind shift, then you can also help co-regulate people and be their coach. And I'll just tell you that never stops, because, I was, this is probably going back a month or so, but I was on a phone call with somebody, and at the end of that phone, I was just so angry. And like, I know enough to like, okay, so let me do some mindfulness of, and I'll calm myself down. Let me ask myself some of these questions. Nothing. I mean, not nothing, because I did calm down a little bit, but I was still like, angry and anxious. And so what I did, my kids are adults, so I called my son. And I'm like, and his name is Herb or Herbie. I said, Herbie, like, I just had this conversation. I am still really upset about it. And he's like, Dad, you wrote the book. He says, I know, I just can't do this. He says, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go to the book. And he just opens up the book. We're on the phone, but, and he says, okay, let me walk you through this technique. And he just walked me through a couple of things with the technique, and that was enough. But I just needed another person to do that. Mm-hmm. And so if you can develop a community of people where you can find these trusted advisors who, you can call when you're in something that you can't get yourself out of, but they know that they can call you, and you've got the same vocabulary. You can help each other out of those situations where you're in limbic, fight, flight, freeze mode.
That's cool. And that reinforces the principle of empathy too, I guess.
It does. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So, last question I have for you here is, I guess as people try to take on, so many things, trying to follow their passions, attempting to find success through sometimes any means necessary. Is there any reason to caution people against trying to do too much? Or is it something where as long as they're feeling fulfilled, it's okay to do that? Because I know a lot of this is about mindfulness and making sure that you're understanding your reactions to things. But, and sometimes that might push people into this survival mode. But if they're feeling fulfilled, is there any caution?
As you were asking that question, I had this image going back probably 20 years ago. There was a bar in New York where they played like grunge music, and there was a big lizard on top of that bar, and the sign above the lizard was "Too much is not enough." So, so I'm thinking, okay, yeah, too much is not enough. That's my motto. I can go with that. So, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of like, is there too much to try? It's, you try, you take on as many things as you want to. If you're trying to change yourself, or if you're trying to help another person change, it just seems through what I've learned about cognitive science and psychology that really you can only focus on 1 or 2 changes at a time, and changes take somewhere between a month to 3 months to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to calm down more, maybe you choose 1 or 2 of the techniques that help you calm down, and you focus on them for a month or 2. And when you feel that they've become habits, that you're doing them and you've made progress on those, maybe you pick 1 or 2. But trying to say, something, I'm gonna do meditation. I'm gonna learn to ask better questions of myself. I'm going to be more empathetic to other people. I'm going to be able to tap into my higher level values all the time. You can't make all those changes at once. Okay. Right. You're going to make changes over time. And then, a year or 2 years later, you're going to look back and say, wow, look at all the progress that I made. It's all just as important as you're choosing those 1 or 2 things to do, that when you have a success, it's like, let's say that one of the things you chose was to ask yourself questions that opened yourself up rather than close yourself down. And you're in a situation, you ask one of those questions to yourself, and it's like, that really worked. Don't forget to celebrate it. Okay. Yeah. You just did something great. And if you try it and it didn't work, then the key thing then is not to say it was because of the situation, it was because of this other person, it was because of me, blah, blah, blah. The key thing at that point is to say, something, this gave me an opportunity to try something. Maybe by trying it multiple times, I'll get better at it. Or I tried this. This is what resulted. This is what I can learn from this. Or a third thing is like, I tried this, it didn't work, but something, I tried it. I'm going to go reward myself, and I'm going to, I don't know, get a pedicure right now, or whatever it is that you can do as a little reward for yourself. But don't forget to celebrate your trials and celebrate your wins as you're making these small steps.
Yeah, that's great. There seems to be a lot of emphasis on self-care, which is always important. And, in general, patience that, people should exhibit as they, hopefully, work through these things, because, there's a lot of people dealing with probably the same issues. And it's always important to, understand that, Rome wasn't built in a day, and you can't get there immediately. But that's awesome. Well, Mitch, this has been great. Thank you so much for, not only, kind of sharing, some of your thoughts and general way of thinking, with everybody, but, definitely thanks for the chat in general. This was awesome. Is there anything you'd like to plug?
Well, I just hope that people, we talked about, maybe education, we talked about self-care, we talked about decision-making. I think that people, should understand that these principles apply to everything in your life. So when you're faced with difficulties at work, maybe people that you're fighting with, maybe problems that come up and you're sure that you can't do them, or you're sure that this other person can't do them. These principles help you remain resourceful and resilient, and they take interactions with other people that could lead to conflict, and they help them become either constructive conflict or collaborative ventures. So you can apply these to work, you can apply these to family, you can apply these to friends. These are principles that are really designed to make you more effective, and while you're being more effective, to feel more self-fulfilled and happy while you're doing it.
Cool. That's great. Well, I will definitely put a link to your website in the description.
Yeah. It's not hard. Mindshiftingwithmitch.com.
Oh, well, there we go. That's easy enough. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast, and definitely it was great chatting with you.
Brent, thank you so much for including me.
Definitely.
And good luck to all of your listeners.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, this has been another episode of Mix and Matchbox. I am your host, Brent Feldman. We'll be back soon with more content. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.